Anybody else?
Thank you.
People are coming.
All right. So I made a mental note to start the class today by saying that today is a very special day. It's the yahrzeit of Aaron HaKohen, first Kohen Gadol. Yes, bring that close to me.
Yeah, just a sec.
I think it's the only yahrzeit you could. Now I'm going on memory. I didn't see this recently. I think it's the only yahrzeit that's mentioned in the Torah. We know Moshe Rabbeinu, Zion other. I don't think it says that in the Torah. It's tradition. But Aaron, it says, Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. It tells a whole story. Fascinating story. Moshe went up onto the mountain with his brother Aaron and Elazar. And Moshe had a big dilemma. How is he going to break the news to his brother that it's time for him to leave this world? And he said to him, Aaron, I have a problem. What's your problem? He said, no, I'm getting it mixed up. I'm sorry. I didn't have a chance to look the story up again. I've written it. I'm only remembering the story with Rabbi Meir. Similar story, Rabbi Meir and his wife Beruria. They had 2 children. Rabbi Meir went for Shabbos, and over Shabbos the children passed away. So what did she do? She laid the children in bed, covered them up nicely. When her husband came home, she said, Rabbi Meir, I have a question in halacha. He said, what's that? He said, somebody came by one time and he was traveling and he didn't want to take some jewels that he had with him. So he left them with me that I should watch over them. And he said I could use them. He gave me permission to use them. And I grew very fond of them. And now he's coming back. And I really don't want to part with them. What should I do? He said, halacha, you have to give them back. It's halacha. You were giving them, watch over them. I have to give them back to the owner. She said, okay. I accept. Come with me. Took him to the bedroom, saw the children, and he understood. She prepared him. And Moshe prepared Aaron in a similar way. Well, I think he used the mashal of light. I just don't remember the discussion that they had. Exactly how it went. Until Aaron finally understood that Hashem wanted his neshama back. So they went up onto Har Ahar, a mountain on top of a mountain. Could be, it's called Har Ahar, a mountain on top of a mountain, because it stands for 2 levels of the Torah, revealed level of Torah, and the higher level that's not revealed to everybody. The inner level of the secrets of the Torah. And he took him up onto this mountain together with Aaron's son, Elazar. And they came to a cave. And in the cave, they found that there was a bed. And there was a table. And there was a lamp that was lit. And Moshe took the garments off of Aaron and put them onto Elazar. And he said to him, happy is the man who gets to see his son, like you're seeing your son now, wearing the garments of your high office. as Kohen Gadol. Because Elazar was going to be Kohen Gadol now. So as he took each garment off, he put it on Elazar. Then he told him, get up on the table, on the bed. He got up on the bed. He said, put your arms by your side. Close your mouth. Close your eyes. And his neshama went out. And that's called to pass away with a kiss. So peaceful. The Gemara discusses different ways that people have to leave the world. It's the hardest of all is hunger. Pass away from hunger. So some people who are very, very involved with the physical world, like they have a lot of desires for the pleasures of this world, it's very hard for the neshama to leave the body. It says it's like tearing a woolen garment out of the thorn bush. The neshama doesn't want to let go. Comes out with difficulty. It says for a tzaddik, who has no interest in the pleasures of this world except to use them as they serve Hashem, in the service of Hashem, the neshama goes out of the body like taking a hair out of milk. A hair falls into your porridge, into the milk, just slips out.
Can I ask a question? How come the Rebbe was sick?
What?
How come he had like a heart attack and then a stroke? How come he didn't pass like that?
You'll have to ask the one that gave him to him.
Okay.
The Rebbe's heart attack is amazing. The Rebbe healed himself. The way we have the doctors, you can see it on Gem. Dr. Weiss describes his condition. He said he would always be short of breath. He would never be able to move more than 4 feet away from the bed.
Wow.
And he had a life expectancy of a few years like this, maybe. We got 14 years of tremendous activity, energy, sichas, memorim, verbringens, letters. Yechidus standing for hours, giving out dollars and brachas, editing, the tremendously heavy work schedule that the Rebbe maintained. It's all miraculous. Dr. Weiss records that when he told the Rebbe his situation, the Rebbe understood everything and said to him, what do you know about stem cells? He says that he was astonished. He hardly knew anything about stem cells at that time, 1978. It was still 1977. Nobody knew about stem cells. A few handful of people in the whole world knew about stem cells. The Rebbe's idea was that the stem cells could regenerate the scar tissue into functioning heart tissue. He said your heart could heal, but it'll never pump. Scars can't pump. So Rebbe said, what about stem cells? So he didn't know. Rebbe said, I suggest you look into it. He says, when he got back to Chicago, he told this story with his friends. They had a good chuckle over it. Wow. They didn't even know about it. Here the Rebbe was already on top of the whole scientific situation. And, okay, enough about that. Question. Was Aaron's, the way Aaron passed, was it respectful? That Aaron should, what happened? Aaron took off all his clothes. Is that a respectable way for a high priest to leave the world naked? Obviously not. So what happened? All his clothes were being put onto Elazar. What happened? The Medrash says an extraordinary thing. Rashi doesn't bring it down. It's a Medrash. Even as he took each garment off of Aaron and put it on Elazar, there was Aaron was still wearing the garment. Only it was a spiritual garment. So there was Elazar wearing physical garments, and Aaron was wearing spiritual garments of his high priesthood. Of course, we learned in our Tanya class that every person in this world, what are we doing? We're preparing garments for our neshama that the neshama will wear in Gan Eden. Right? Chapter 5, Tanya. That the Torah that we learn is food for the neshama in Gan Eden, and the mitzvahs that we do, lishma, if we do them for the sake of Hashem, they become the garments that the neshama wears in Gan Eden. So a person like Aaron had all his garments. Garments in the Kohen Gadol. What was Aaron? We have to learn from that. The Hayiten Aliboy, the Rebbe taught us. When the Rebbe said, when a tzaddik leaves this world, so those people who are alive have to take it to heart. And there are two ways you take it to heart that come to mind. What the Rebbe referred to was that we have to eternalize the good things from the life of that person. And this, by the way, is something that even the Reformed Jews teach. That we believe in Olam Haba, in the world to come, a reality. But we also believe in this concept, V'achayiten alibe, Yaakov Avinu lay mace. Yaakov did not die. It's discussed in the Talmud, in the Gemara about fasting. If you want to look it up, I think it's on page 5. In the Gemara, you probably have translations somewhere. You could even look it up online. Look it up. Jacob, our father, did not die. Google it up, you'll get the whole story. Jacob, our father, did not die. That two rabbis were traveling together. It was hot. They came to an oasis. So they sat down, they washed themselves up, they drank, they ate. In the middle of the meal, one said to the other, I think it was Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rabbi Nachman, who was the teacher, maybe in the middle of the meal, the Rebbe would say a Devar Torah. So he said, in a meal, you shouldn't speak with a mouth full. That was his Devar Torah. That's a Devar Torah. So they ate in silence because it's a sakana. The food could, while you're talking, the food could go down the wrong way, like they say, go down the wrong way. You choke. It could be a sakana. After the meal, he said, Yaakov Avinu le'meis. Yaakov didn't die. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, what do you mean he didn't die? The Torah says he passed away. It says they embalmed him, they mourned him, they buried him in the Nile. No, they buried him in Maras HaMachpelah. They eulogized him. How do you say he didn't die? So he answers, and he says, the Egyptians thought he died because on their level of understanding, he was gone. That's what it means. But the pasuk says, "Ma zarei b'chayim, afu b'chayim." As long as his children are alive, he is alive. In other words, as long as what he stood for and what he embodied is continued in this world, he lives in that. His whole essence is alive. That's exactly what the Reformed Jews teach also. And that's Torah. And Hasidim turn it around. In other words, this simple understanding of that statement is that we keep a person alive by perpetuating his good ways, his good character. Hasidim turn it around. If we're alive, it's only because he's alive. The reality is that the tzaddik is alive. And because of that, that keeps us alive. Like, for instance, when the Tzemach Tzedek was nostalgic, there was a chassid who was so bereft that he grabbed a stick and he broke all the windows in the Beis HaMedrash. And he said, "What are you people doing just sitting here? Don't you realize you're all dead?" You see, because that's how he understood it. The tzaddik isn't alive. What are we doing here? How are we still alive? It's only the tzaddik's life. The tzaddik is the channel of life for us in the world. Just like your brains. If a person has a lobotomy, is he alive? Can't function anymore. Is he really alive? Just on machine support. Is he alive? So the tzaddik is the brains and the source of life for the whole generation. If the tzaddik is gone, how does the generation survive? I remember after Gimel Tammuz, I went over to one of the rabbis in our community. And I said to him, "What are we doing here? How can we, if Gimel Tammuz is Gimel Tammuz, how can we still be here?" He says, "I have the same question." So the conclusion is, same way you have to say Yaakov Avinu didn't die. If we're still all here, you have to say that Rebbe didn't die. Talking now spiritually. So that's the second way of understanding this. The Mazare B'chaim, the same way that his seed, his children are alive, his students are alive, students are called children, people who learn his teachings are his children. The same way they're alive, same way he's alive, they're alive. And the Hasidim take it the other way, the same way, since he's alive, that's why we are alive. So Aaron was perpetuated in his son, Elazar. And the garments that he had were garments that he had made for himself in this world that he was able to take with him. And there they were. Moshe you could see the Medrash describes it in very visual terms. So we have to take this to heart. What did Aaron stand for? The Mishnah tells us clearly in Pirkei Avos, which we learned just this last week. We learned the first chapter of Pirkei Avos about Aaron. It says in Pirkei Avos, we have to be the students of Aaron. It's interesting how the two things come together. Pirkei Avos, we always read Pirkei Avos, chapter 1, just before the 9 days. And the first of the 9 days is the outside of Aaron HaKohen. Who could orchestrate things like that? There's so many extraordinary coordinates, coincidences in our Jewish life that we learn the term hashgacha pratis to describe it. And this is another one. That when we read about Aaron passing away, we read about it in the Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, and we read about it in the Torah at the same time. So what does it say in the Mishnah? It says, "Hayei mitalmidav shel Aaron HaKohen, oyev sholem, rodav sholem." Love peace, love sholem, and pursue sholem. love bries, love creatures, meaning people, and draw them near to the Torah. And the Hasidus stops on this word creatures and says to love people who are, you wouldn't even call them human. They're on such a low level, their only merit is that they're creations of God. Love God's creations and draw them near to the Torah. How do you draw a person near to the Torah? Well, you girls know. Somebody comes new into the dorm. You don't right away begin scolding them. Be nice to them. And they look around and they see the differences between what they thought was normal until now and how everybody else is behaving. And it's behaved the same way. It's a funny story. Melville Green, the famous scientist, NASA scientist, Oliver Sholem, when he came to the Rebbe for the first time, came to New York. So he saw everybody's wearing a hat. He didn't have a hat. So he says, where's the hat store? He says, there's a hat store there, Mike's Hats, but it's closed. He says, anywhere in Crown Heights I can get a hat? He didn't want to go into the Rebbe without a hat. So there was a woman named Mariasha, famous personality in Crown Heights. Her husband was taken away when he was still in his 20s, maybe early 30s, by the communists. He was killed. He was Amoyo, and left her with 6 or 7 little children. And she had to raise them. She had no money, nothing. She had to raise them. Her whole life was a miracle. She has like now 900 at last count, maybe not my last count. Maybe it's now over 1,000 offspring. Most of them, nearly all of them, are involved in shlichus. From these 7, they tried to destroy the family. The family prevailed. So Mariasha used to go, and all the time, whenever Hasidim would come for $1, get $1 from the Rebbe, have a few thousand Hasidim would come, she'd stand with a pushka, Oli Torah, she would say, Oli Torah. She'd collect money for the yeshiva. Never took a penny for herself. She had a shmata store on Kingston Avenue for Alta Zach, old things. People would, give her clothes, she would sell them. So he said, maybe Mariasha would have a hat for you. Anybody ever met any of the Shagalov family? Or the Lanes? Or the Kazans? They're all from her. Huge family. Every one of them is a huge family. Anyway, so she had this store, little lady. She had this store. He goes into the store. He says, do you have a hat? She says, oh, yeah, sure. I have a hat. Some good hat, nice hats. So he takes it, he says, can I have a hat? She says, sure. So she sells him a hat. He asked her, you sure this is a good hat? It's presentable? Yeah, very presentable, very good. She puts on the hat and he walks out of the store. And that night he has Yechidus with the Rebbe for the first time. He'd been by the Rebbe before, his shliach had brought him. That was the first time he's alone, he's having Yechidus with the Rebbe. Comes in, the Rebbe looks at him. The Rebbe pauses. The Rebbe smiles. And he says, where did you get the hat? He says, from the lady there on Kingston Avenue. The Rebbe said, so chuckles. He says, please take it off. As long as you're wearing that hat, I don't think I can talk to you with a straight face.
What was the hat?
Well, it was an old, used up hat, old battered hat with probably been through so many rainstorms. All its color probably dripped out of it. So anyway, garments. We're talking about garments of the soul. The garments of Aaron that he leaves to all mankind are the garments of peace, shalom. It says, the men mourned Moshe Rabbeinu for 30 days. The men and the women mourned Aaron, both. More than Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, at Aaron's Levaya. What was his Levaya? I don't know. When Moshe came down from the mountain with Elazar, without Aaron, there was a rebellion. There was a threatened rebellion. They didn't believe that Aaron could die. Because when there was a plague, Aaron went and Moshe told him, take the incense pan and put incense in it on coals and go and tell the Malach Hamem, the angel that takes people's neshamas away, that he's not allowed to do anymore. 24,000 people died. Moshe sent Aaron, stop the plague. So he went. Rashi describes this for us. Anybody remember the Rashi? What does Rashi say there? We just had it. The Malach said, Aaron said, yeah, you're not allowed to take any more. He says, I'm a shlich of the Eibishter. Aaron said, yeah, but I'm shlich of Moshe Rabbeinu. He said, well, who's greater, the Eibishter or Moshe? He says, go ask for yourself. The two of them are talking by the Ohel Moed. If you don't believe me. So is it possible that the person who went and talked down the angel of death, that he should die? They didn't believe that. Maybe we should kill him. How could he die? So it was almost a rebellion. But what he left for us is the legacy of Sholem. So what was his Levaya? It says his Levaya, there were 80,000 children who were grown up from up to the age of 40, who had been born during the 40 years that they were in the wilderness. And they all had the name Aaron. How they have the name Aaron? Because the husband and wife were fighting, and they were going to separate. They had separated, or they were going to separate. The family was dysfunctional. And Aaron came and made Sholem. And they had a child. So they called the child Aaron, because if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have had the child. It's like the story of this woman who got stopped by a policeman. And he opened her wallet, and he saw a picture of the Rebbe. He says, is this your rabbi? She said, yes. He says, okay, I'm not going to give you a ticket, but, don't do it again. She says, why aren't you giving me a ticket? I said, I'll tell you. I used to drive as an escort for the rabbi when he would go to the cemetery. And I was married for 10 years. And one day I said to one of the boys who used to go along to accompany the rabbi, does the rabbi give blessings to non-Jews? They said, of course, rabbi gives blessings to anybody who asks. So he said, well, how do you ask? They said, not a problem. You're escorting the Rebbe's car. When the Rebbe comes out from the gravesite of his father-in-law, from the oil, you wait by the car, open the door for the rabbi, and tell him that you want a blessing. He says, I do want a blessing. I'm married 10 years. We have no children. So that's what he did. The Rebbe, I don't know what the Rebbe said. I don't know. Maybe he said we should hear good news. That's what the Rebbe liked to say. We should hear good news. That year we had a child, says the policeman. And you know what we called the child? Menachem Mendel. And my parents were very upset. Why do you give the child a name like that? It's a Jewish name. In school, the kids are going to pick on him. He says, well, he'll have to teach them not to pick on Jews. So that's how all the children had the name of Aaron, because he was such a peacemaker in people's marriages. And he made peace with them. And what was his method? I'm sure you've heard this before. He would go to each of the parties and tell them that your Baal Plukta, the guy you're arguing with, was talking to me. And he tells me he's very upset that you're not speaking to each other anymore because you used to be good friends. And he's very upset about it. And he wants to get back to he doesn't know how to apologize to you, but he wants to renew your friendship. And then he would go to the other guy and tell him the same thing. So when they met, they both thought that the other one was really willing to make up. And so they made up. And that was his trick. That's how he used to do it. And that's what we learned from Aaron. Okay. So since that's the first day of the month, and I add another thought to this, which is the first day of the month today is called the Rosh, the head. And like your head is a source of life for your whole body, so the head of the month is a source of life for the whole of the month. So here's a contradiction. Minei Ubei. It's a contradiction because today is the beginning of the 9 days. So it's a very serious day. 9 days are the source of 2,000 years of Golus, suffering, persecution, the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, and untold numbers, millions and millions of Jews who lost their lives because of these 9 days. So how do we have a message of peace? That Aaron blesses all the people with peace. The Rebbe would always say to a person who's a Kohen, you have to bless people. How do you bless people? Talk to them. Find out what do they need. How are they doing? How's the health of their family members? How's the business? How are the children doing? How are your parents? Talk to them. Bless them. You're a Kohen. You have the power to bless. There was a guy here in town, Sydney, he passed away with the corona. He was a shikar. He was always getting drunk. Come to a simcha, and he would drink too much, and he'd go staggering home. But he would always come over to people and say, I'm a Kohen. Are you married? And he'd give people, go to girls, go to boys, are you married? I give him my blessing. I'm a Kohen. I'm giving you a blessing. You should get married this year. Then go over to young women, pretty women, say to them, you have children? Are you married? Yes, you have children. I give you a blessing. You should have a child this year and invite me to the bris. He was a real character. He was a real character. And he never got married. And you should see, you could go on COL Live. They recorded, and a lot of people wrote in about how fond they were of Sydney. Shmuel, what's his name? A Kohen has to give brachas. And there was a guy, Abelsky. He has children in our community. Abelsky was originally from Israel, and he went to Kishinev. You know him. So the Rebbe told him, wherever he goes, he should give people brachas. And he used to announce, I'm in town. Anybody needs a bracha, they should come to me. But he would ask that everybody who needs if you want a bracha, you have to make a keli for your bracha. You have to make a vessel to receive the blessing by adding in Torah and mitzvahs. That will be your keli. Make a good decision about Torah and mitzvahs, and then you're zeicha to a bracha. And the Birkas Koyanim, which we say on Yom Tovim, Eretz Yisrael, at the Kaisel, they say Birkas Koyanim every day. And at the end it says, V'ani avarachim, and I, says the Eibishter, will also bless them. If the Kohen blesses them, I will bless them. And the Rashi says that means also he'll bless the Kohen himself. So we can do that. We can be Kohanim, even though we're not Kohanim, but we can be Kohen. We can be like Kohanim. We should always listen to people, listen carefully, hear what they need, and give them blessings. It helps them. Your blessing strengthens them. It is the legacy of Aaron. And that's why the men and the women mourned for Aaron, not just the men, like they mourned for Moshe Rabbeinu. All right. This Shabbos, just like the last 3 weeks, I prepared 2 sichas, and I hardly spoke about even one. But because I wanted to make sure that I didn't overlook the fact that what does this mean? I was just trying to explain the inherent contradiction between Rosh Chodesh and the month of Av. The month of Av is dominated by the tragedies that happened in these 9 days. However, the end of the month of Av is very happy, because it says from the 15th of Av, when the moon is full, there was no happier day in the whole Jewish year than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. The Gemara on fasting says, we can understand why Yom Kippur is a happy day, because people are forgiven for their sins. What could be greater? Huh? We found out about Yiddishkeit, and we were so worried about mistakes that you made in your life before now. Comes on Yom Kippur and you're clean. It's over. You leave your fickle past behind you. There used to be a hillbilly song that I heard on the radio when I was a little boy. Leave your fickle past behind you, and I didn't understand what the words meant. So I used to sing the song, "Leave your fickle past behind you." But it's such a wonderful thing to do tshuva. There's no greater happiness, really, than to really do tshuva and know that your mistakes have all become positive merits. Just don't go back to them. Don't mull them over. Don't reminisce like a good wine, Sniff and think about it again. Don't do that. So Yom Kippur is a happy day. Why do we say that the 15th of Av was even happier than Yom Kippur? And it gives many reasons. Hasidus, the reason, a lot of stories happened, there were resolutions. One of the stories that you might be interested in was it was a day of shidduchim, that all the girls would exchange clothes with one another to equalize everybody. So there would be nobody could be arrogant or haughty or proud. And they would go out into the vineyards and they would call to the Bachrim and say, Bachrim, lift up your eyes and choose yourself a bride. Now's the day. Choose yourself a bride. Yeah. You want a good family? Choose somebody from a good family. You want somebody who's smart? Yeah, choose somebody that is attractive in your eyes. And the girls who didn't have a good background, that didn't come from rich families, they said, Bocher, just take me the way I am, but buy me jewels. Buy me jewelry. I'll be your wife. I'll be a good wife, but you have to take good care of me. And Hasidus interprets this whole thing. Alpi Hasidus explains since it was a day of chasanas, a day of choosing brides, it was a very happy day. It was a very, very happy day. Everybody got hitched up. There are other reasons. There was a massacre. A lot of many Jews were killed. And the Romans wouldn't let the Jews bury their dead. And they were smelling. On this day, the 15th of Av, they were allowed to bury their dead. What happened? What made it such a happy day was that the first 15th of Av, when it became a happy day, was after 40 years in the Midbar. What happened was there's really next week's shir should be on this, but we'll talk about it this week instead. That after 40 years, what happened every year, that on the 9th of Av was the decree that the Jews would not enter Eretz Yisrael. They could live to the age of 60. Anybody who was 20 at the time could live 40 years till 60. Anybody who was 30 could only live 30 years. After 60, that was it. So anybody who approached the 60th year, what did they do? They went out and they dug their grave. They dug their own grave and they lay down in it. They said Krishma. They gave their soul over to Hashem, and they didn't get up in the morning. Every year on Tisha B'Av. The 40th year, same thing. People went out and dug their graves, and the 60-year-olds lay down in the grave. And then now the 30-year-olds were all finished. 35-year-olds were gone. Now there was the 60-year-olds, the last year. They all lay down in their grave, and they said Shema, and they lay down. They got up in the morning. They thought, what's going on? We must have made a mistake about the calendar. maybe this is only 8th of Av. So they fasted, maybe they fasted a second day. And that night they went and they lay down and they said Kriya Shema. They got up again in the morning. They really couldn't figure this out. And they kept on doing this for a few more days. But then they saw that the moon was full. Because on the 15th of every month, the moon is full, right? Our calendar is a lunar calendar. The 15th of the month, the moon is full. So they knew that the decree was over. And that meant that the years in the wilderness were terminated and a new generation could now go into Eretz Yisrael, which represents the Geula. This is the Geula, to leave Golus and go into Eretz Yisrael, to leave the Midbar and go into Eretz Yisrael. And this is the inner meaning of the 15th of Av, called Chamisha Asar B'Av. And that reminds us of Chamisha Asar B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, which is a new year for trees. In the same way that there's a machlokes in the Talmud, which is the day is the new year for trees? Is it the 15th of Shvat or is it the 1st of Shvat? So Beis Shammai says it's the 1st of Shvat because the first day gives a blessing to the whole month. So according to Beis Shammai, the first day of Shvat is even more important than the 15th. According to Hillel, no, the 15th of Shvat, the moon is hidden. On the 1st of Shvat, the moon is hidden. On the 15th of Shvat, the moon is full. Everybody can see that this is the fullness of the moon. And the Jewish people are compared to the moon. We count by the moon. So the 15th of Av and the 15th of Shvat are very, very important days. Our Yom Tovim are on the 15th. Pesach is on the 15th of Nisan. And Sukkot is on the 15th of Tishrei. You'll notice, each of these holidays, the moon is full. But Beis Shammai says, but the first day of the month is the most important because it contains all of the life of the whole of the month, like your head. Rosh Chodesh, here's DL. Take a bow. Here she is, folks.
She donated plasma.
Wow. To whom?
Whoever needs
To the
it.
agency.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you, dear. I always knew you had it in you.
Thank you, Rabbi Pape.
So this is the inherent contradiction, you see, because if the first day of the month, like Beis Shammai says, is even more important than the 15th of the month, and the 15th of the month of Av was the happiest day in the whole Jewish year, even happier than Yom Kippur, so the first day of the month, according to Beis Shammai, should even be happier, but it's the first day of Tisha B'Av. So this is the inherent contradiction in the first day, Rosh Chodesh of Av. But what it is, it's potential. Beis Shammai goes according to the potential. The difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Hasidus explains, is that Beis Shammai always goes according to potential. And Beis Hillel always goes according to reality. So Beis Shammai says, on Hanukkah, you light 8 candles on the first night, because that's when the potential for lighting candles is at the greatest. And Beis Hillel says, no, 1 candle each night. So the greatest revelation of the light of Hanukkah is on the 8th day of Hanukkah. So Beis Hillel also says the happiest day of the month of Av is the 15th of Av. And Hasidus explains that the great happiness of the 15th of Av is not just all these things that happen. It's the Geula, when the Jewish people could go into Eretz Yisrael after 40 years in the Midbar. And it's the day when all the girls got shidduchim. And it's the day when they took down the guards that prevented people from going from Eretz Yisrael to the base from the north, when it separated into 2 kingdoms. So the kings in the north didn't want people going to the south, to the base of Mikdash, which was in the south. And they put guards, you couldn't go. You couldn't go, the people in the north couldn't go. On the 15th of Av, they took down the guards. So that's another reason, it was a big simcha that people could go to the base of Mikdash, all these, but the real simcha, which is the simcha connected with Geula, like the next generation going to Eretz Yisrael, the real simcha is, according to Hasidus, commensurate with the tragedy. As great as was the tragedy of Tisha B'Av, it's the biggest tragedy ever. So the opposite is the greatest simcha ever. Because the whole point of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is in order to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. So that in the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, you already have the potential. You see this where Beis Shammai comes in. The potential on Tisha B'Av is the potential of the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. What greater simcha could there be? The Geula Amitis V'Ashlema. This is the inherent contradiction of Rosh Chodesh Av, that it's the yard site of Aaron HaKohen. So the idea of Aaron HaKohen should dominate the whole of the month, which is a legacy of love and peace. Be the Talmud from the Talmidim of Aaron. Ohev Shem, love peace, love other people, and draw them near to the Torah. So this should be the dominant inner feeling of the whole of the month of Av. And when is it revealed? It's revealed on the 15th of Av, when the moon is not hidden, like on the first day of the month, but when the moon is full, because the moon is the expression of the ethos of the Jewish people. How do you like that word, ethos? It's a new word in my vocabulary. I never used it before in my life. I just happened to see it in an article. Anyway, we didn't even look at these two sichas, but this sicha that means the vision thing is very interesting about how on Tisha B'Av, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev said that the Shabbos is called Shabbos of vision, Shabbos Chazayin. It's called a vision because that's the first word of the Haftorah. The Haftorah is the vision of Isaiah. And Isaiah, everything Isaiah says is comfort. He's a voice of comfort to the Jews suffering in Golus, a voice of comfort for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And his Haftarah begins with the word Chazayin Yeshayahu. So the Berditchever, it's a message. Chazayin means a vision. He said it's not just that it's named vision because that's the first word of the Haftarah. It's called the Shabbos of vision because on this Shabbos, every single one of us has a vision of the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. We can see it. As I say, well, our neshama can see it. Tzaddikim can maybe see it with their real eyes. And that inspires us to do tshuva. And by doing tshuva, we take away the golus. When a person does tshuva, golus disappears. Because the whole reason for the golus is because people didn't live up to what was expected of them in Torah and mitzvahs, especially in the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael, since the Beis Hamikdash was only destroyed because of the lack of Ahavas Yisrael, for no reason whatsoever. A famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. If you don't know it, you'll find out soon enough. Tisha B'Av, someone will tell you the story. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The pointless dislike, resentment that they had for one another led to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And the antidote to that is pointless love. Pointless love we learn from Aaron. So that's the inner theme of the whole month of Av. And correcting the cause of the Golus and the destruction of the temple brings out the inner meaning that's within it, which is the love of Jewish people for one another, which is prompted by the love for Hashem, because if you love a person, you love his children. It's an expression of our love of God. And this is returned, our love for one another is returned because when someone is nice to your children, you feel very grateful to them and you want to help them and you want to further whatever they need. So Hashem, when we behave nicely to one another, Hashem just wants to pour blessings into the world. And that's how tshuva, being nice to other people, is the main mitzvah of all the mitzvahs of the Torah, Ahavas Yisrael. How that takes away That's tshuva that takes away the cause of the golus, which was pointless hatred. And like the Rebbe says, the Beis Mikdash will be rebuilt by pointless love. And that, if we can behave like that with pointless love, then that will end the golus and lead to the coming of Mashiach, who will rebuild the Beis Mikdash from here. Amen. Then these days will become the greatest days of happiness, which we have a taste of that in the 15th of Av. It's a Mishnah. Even the Mishnah was written 2,000 years ago after the destruction of the temple, but says that there were no greater days of happiness in the whole Jewish year than the 15th of Av, when the moon is full. So that reveals the inner meaning and potential of what Av is all about, even though now we see that the meaning of Av is the destruction of the days of, limitation and sadness. But the inner meaning of the sadness is this is going to give way to the greatest happiness of all. That's what it's all about. We should merit to see this vision, not just spiritually, but even physically. Oh, one other point, just to mention briefly, how should this affect me when I don't physically see this vision? What does it mean to me? This is called Shabbos of vision. I don't see it. Maybe you do. You're more righteous. Bali Chuba can stand, No one can beat it. But how does it help if you don't really see this vision? The answer is, you may not see it, but you have 5 levels of your neshama. You have nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. You may not see it with your nefesh, because your nefesh is connected with your physical body. Your physical body is very limited in its sensitivity to holiness, as we all know, by our lowly desires and selfish thoughts. But maybe the ruach is more sensitive. The neshama, certainly, it says only the heels of the neshama are actually connected with your body. And then the chaya is higher than that altogether. And the yechida, don't even mention it. So the yechida does see it. Maybe the chaya also sees it. Maybe the neshama sees it. Okay? They're not so physically connected with our body. But it shocks the neshama. It inspires the neshama. And that inspiration, like when you're excited about an idea, it affects the way you walk. It affects the way you talk. It affects the way you look at others and how you feel about others. And it puts you in a good mood. And you're in such a great mood. And someone says, what got into you today? You're in such good form. You see? So the neshama is in very, very good form because of this vision that it's given on Tisha B'Av. And then that affects the chaya, and the chaya affects the neshama, and the neshama affects the ruach affects the neshama, and you don't even know why. And all of a sudden you feel that it's real, it's really real, it's for real. Torah and mitzvah is for real. I love it, I'm so happy I fell into this place. I could do Torah and mitzvahs, and I could learn how to lead a Jewish life. Have a great Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.